In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, December 6th. Israeli forces have entered Khan Younis, the first target of an expanded ground mission into southern Gaza to eradicate the Palestinian militant group Hamas, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declares control of regional security even after the campaign against Hamas. Meanwhile, cases of mycoplasma pneumonia, especially among children here, have been escalating following reports of its prevalence in neighboring China, and health authorities across the region are calling for public caution. And the latest study on academic performance of students worldwide by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development shows Korea appears to have been little affected by COVID-19 related learning disruptions at schools. Israel's military campaign against Hamas has been expanded to include southern Gaza, with its soldiers now at the heart of a major city there, where fighting has been intense. Our Ising-jae has the latest.
The Israel Defense Forces on Tuesday reached southern Gaza's main city of Khan Younis, marking what they called the most intense day of combat in 5 weeks of ground operations against Hamas. Backed by warplanes and tanks, the IDF reached the heart of the city, where many Palestinians who fled since the start of the armed conflict are now situated. According to the chief of Israel's general staff, Israeli forces have secured many Hamas strongholds in the northern Gaza Strip and are now operating against the strongholds in the south. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that the Israel Defense Forces should retain control of the region following the disarmament of Gaza and the end of the war, shooting down any notion that an international force could be responsible for security in the Gaza Strip.
I want to say a word about the day after Hamas. Gaza needs to be demilitarized. But in order for Gaza to be demilitarized, there's just one force that can demilitarize it, and that power is the IDF. No international force can be responsible for that. We saw in other places what happened when they brought in international forces to demilitarize them. I am not willing to close my eyes and accept any other arrangement.
Gaza's health ministry says the death toll among Palestinians since the start of the armed conflict has now surpassed 16,000, with some 40,000 others injured. With the dire situation in Gaza, the World Health Organization appealed for protection for the health system against further attacks. The UN Health Agency says with more civilians in southern Gaza receiving immediate evacuation orders and being forced to move, more people are being concentrated into smaller areas, while the remaining hospitals in those areas run without sufficient fuel, medicine, food, water, or protection from health workers. It added that the number of functioning hospitals in the Gaza Strip has dropped from 36 to 18, with some treating 2 to 3 times more patients than they were designed for. Ising-jae, Arirang News.
Back here in this part of the world, mycoplasma pneumonia is the latest health concern among children in the region. Our Park Gonu has details.
The recent spread of respiratory diseases in South Korea and globally has increased concerns domestically. The illnesses include both flu in South Korea and a recent surge of mycoplasma pneumonia, especially among children in China. In response, pharmaceutical companies have been increasing production of medicine, including fever reducers and antibiotics, to cope with the rising demand. According to one drug maker, production of antibiotics jumped 20% on year, while production of cough expectorants rose 15%. And those production figures are rising as the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency reported that around 46 out of 1,000 visitors to outpatient clinics had symptoms of flu during the 4th week of November, 7 times more than expected in a flu season. In China, the Education Ministry issued a notice on preventing and controlling winter epidemic diseases in schools, despite doctors in the country saying the disease is not new and comparatively mild, occurring roughly every 4 years. It has ordered students absent from school to be monitored, personal hygiene regimes to be strengthened, and also requested the stockpiling of masks. This is the first warning issued by the Chinese government related to the spread of respiratory diseases since its zero-COVID policy last year. Meanwhile, specialists say China's recent spike in respiratory illnesses is because it's the first full winter season since strict COVID-19 restrictions were lifted in December 2022. They also said resistance to antibiotics used to treat the disease in children may be one of the reasons for the increase. Elsewhere, officials in Denmark and France say mycoplasma pneumonia is now being considered an epidemic. despite the World Health Organization saying it is not a reportable disease to the WHO and appears to be in decline. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Also on the health front, the Yoon administration has shared details of a comprehensive campaign to stem Korea's shocking suicide rates. Our Choi Soo-young has more.
With South Korea ranking first for suicide rates among the OECD countries last year, the Ministry of Health and Welfare has unveiled new initiatives that aim to better deal with mental health issues. President Yoon explains that the plan is all-encompassing.
특히 저출산 시대에 국민의 정신건강 문제를 해결해서 개인의 역량과 삶의 질을 높일 때 국가 성장을 견인해 나갈 수 있습니다. 정부는 이제 예방치료 회복에 이르기까지 전 과정의 지원 체계를 재설계해서 정신건강 정책의 패러다임을 획기적으로 바꿔 나갈 것입니다.
To improve old mental health policies which focused on after-the-fact treatment and not on prevention, the new approach is more proactive and highlights 4 key tasks. Firstly, the government aims to build a system that's integrated into daily life. This involves launching mobile mental health checkups via the messaging application KakaoTalk and integrating the suicide prevention emergency hotline under a brand new number 109. They also plan to increase counseling support for young people at universities and in workplaces. Secondly, there'll be swift and continuous treatment and management of severe patients. The government also will increase financial support for outpatients care by keeping in touch with those who have had severe mental health problems. As for the long-term strategy for people with severe mental health issues, there'll be better housing support for economically independent living. They will also be officially recognized as a socially vulnerable group, and more people will be eligible for medical insurance, even if they have a record of mental health issues. At the moment, some insurance companies don't offer cover to such people. Lastly, they will improve awareness of mental illnesses to dispel prejudice. Efforts will be made through nationwide campaigns and university club activities so that mental illnesses are seen in a similar way to physical ailments. The Minister of Health and Welfare Ministry Cho Kyu-hong says that with bold investments in mental health care, it will build a society where everyone can integrate.
The government will provide mental health care services to all nationals and residents whenever and wherever through these policies, and build a society where people with mental illnesses can integrate into society without problems.
Though a specific start date hasn't been revealed, though these 4 main strategies, the government plans to provide psychological counseling to 1 million people by 2027 and reduce the suicide rates by 50% within 10 years. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, students here in Korea appear to have been little affected by pandemic-related academic disruptions. Now, this is according to an OECD study that is conducted every 3 years. Our Yoon has details.
The COVID-19 pandemic was a stress test for education systems. Schools and students around the world had to adapt to sudden and profound changes in how learning was carried out, including lockdowns and extended school closures in many countries. The OECD Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, has tested nearly 700,000 15-year-old students in 81 countries or economies on mathematics, reading, and science. Its results released on Tuesday showed South Korea ranked 6th in mathematics, 4th in reading, and 5th in science. The OECD PISA tests explore how well students can solve complex problems, think critically, and communicate effectively. This gives insights into how well education systems are preparing students for real-life challenges and future success. Korea participated for the first time in PISA in 2000. While results for 2022 showed an unprecedented average overall drop in performance across the OECD countries, 18 countries or economies remained above the average. For South Korea, the average 2022 results themselves were about the same as in 2018, when performance levels were actually at the second worst since it first participated in PISA in 2000. But compared to other public education systems, South Korea suffered minimal disruption to its academic levels throughout the COVID-19 pandemic period. The 2022 results for South Korea showed that by gender, boys and girls performed at similar levels on average in mathematics, but girls outperformed boys in reading and science. While the country's overall academic performance remains similar, the gap between the highest scoring students and the weakest students has widened, particularly for mathematics. If school buildings had to close again in the future, many students across the OECD responded that they felt confident about using digital technology for learning remotely. And some 70% of students in South Korea felt confident about using video communication programs. 이은진, Arirang News.
In other news, the current chair of the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission, Kim Hong-il, has been tapped to head the Korea Communications Commission. The nomination comes just 5 days after former KCC chair Lee Dong-kwan tendered his resignation ahead of a parliamentary impeachment vote. According to the presidential office on this Wednesday, Kim is a career prosecutor known for his fairness and leadership. Now, pundits for their part believe his parliamentary hearing will be heated as opposition lawmakers take issue with his lack of media experience. However, parliamentary approval is not required for the president to appoint the head of the KCC. Findings for the month of October show the U.S. labor market responding to the Federal Reserve's tight monetary policy. That is to say, the resilient job market has shown signs of cooling. Our Moon Hye-ryun explains.
Job openings in the United States dropped to the lowest level in more than 2 years, signaling a cooling labor market on the back of high interest rates. According to the U.S. Labor Department on Tuesday, the number of job openings fell to 8.7 million in October, a sharp drop from 9.3 million the month before. It's the lowest number of job openings since March 2021 and is also lower than the expected 9.4 million job openings projected by Dow Jones. This decline is significant as labor market conditions are considered by the Federal Reserve when forming their interest rate policies. Despite the Fed's aggressive rate hikes to ease inflation, the U.S. job market has been surprisingly resilient. This latest figure, however, suggests that higher interest rates are finally dampening demand for workers. It also falls in line with data released last week that showed consumer spending slowing in October. With this latest announcement, Wall Street had a mixed end to trading on Tuesday amid expectations that the Fed could start cutting interest rates soon, and the 10-year Treasury yield falling to its lowest level since September this year. The benchmark S&P 500 sector indexes and the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq gained 0.31%.
So I see a dichotomy as to what's going on in the market today between bonds being very bullish, yet it looks like, obviously, that stocks are a little bit more cautious about the outlook for their prospects going forward.
The financial markets have shown fluctuations throughout the past few months, with the S&P 500 index rising by over 10% in November from late October, amid hopes that the Federal Reserve has halted their rate hikes. It's widely expected that rates will stay unchanged at the Fed's FOMC meeting next week, but some stock markets investors are reportedly betting on rate cuts in March next year. More economic indicators are due to be released before the December interest policy is announced, such as the November jobs report. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
On the local front, the cost of dining out here in Korea jumped 4.8% in November on month, well above the 3.3% acceleration of the country's overall inflation. The restaurant price inflation has been racing faster than overall inflation for 30 months in a row, while that of processed food has remained above overall inflation for 24 months. Pundits are linking the higher price pressure to greater price tags on agricultural products, with those for fruits surging more than 24%. On the trade front, the fate of Korea's urea imports from China remain murky as the neighboring country claims domestic issues are behind the latest export restrictions. Our Song Yoo-jin reports.
On top of recent delays of urea imports destined for South Korea from China, there could also be a curb in shipments next year. According to China's Nitrogen Fertilizer Association on Tuesday, its biggest 15 urea-producing companies, including Sinochem and CNAM-PGC, have agreed to cap their exports to 944,000 tons in 2024. The NFA stated that urea shipments from China will come to a halt until the first quarter of next year, leading to the possibility of a reduced supply to South Korean firms. Chinese media have also reported that urea exports have been temporarily suspended and that the supply will decrease significantly before Chinese New Year's Day. This comes following reports from Korean companies that there have been disruptions in their ordered urea supplies passing through Chinese customs, which was confirmed by the South Korean government. The chemical is used as fertilizer in farming and is a key fluid used to reduce emissions from diesel vehicles. More than 90% of urea used in South Korean diesel vehicles in October came from China, and between January and October alone this year, urea imports from China total nearly 3.4 million tons. Seoul's Trade Ministry consulted with Beijing over these delays and reported that they were the result of a tight domestic urea supply rather than having a political background. Chinese authorities reaffirmed this message by expressing their hope that supply chain cooperation between the two countries would continue smoothly, adding it would seek a solution to customs clearance issues. The two countries' trade authorities also held a joint committee meeting on Tuesday to speed up negotiations for the second phase of a free trade agreement. Urea prices hit a two-year high in China last month, and concerns have spiked over the possibility of a repeat of the 2021 supply shortage when China halted all urea exports. The South Korean government reassured domestic firms, saying that there was currently enough urea in stock to last around 3 months. They will also be seeking ways to diversify import channels. 송유진, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, capital Seoul is hosting the nation's largest tech fair, which began today, that is Wednesday. Organized by Seoul's Trade, Industry and Energy Ministry, the 2023 Korea Industrial Technology R&D Expo marks its 30th anniversary this year. The event runs until this coming Friday and showcases current as well as future technologies in the country's industrial sector. Korean footballer Hwang Hee-chan of Wolverhampton Wanderers has been named man of the match after he scored his 8th Premier League goal of the season. Now, Hwang netted the only goal of the game, sealing the Wolves' victory against Burnley on Tuesday evening local time. Hwang garnered over 83% of votes from fans to secure the title. Given his latest performance, Hwang is now in a three-way tie for 4th place for Premier League goals of this season, just behind Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The Netherlands has announced that it will provide Kiev with $2.6 billion in assistance in 2024. The Dutch Foreign Minister Hanke Bruins-Slot, on an official visit on Tuesday, told her Ukrainian counterpart that your fight is our fight, your security is our security. Amid recent concerns of diminishing Western support, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba said that he did not see any decrease in support coming from partners when it comes to deliveries of weapons and ammunition. Bruins-Slot also mentioned a Dutch pilot training center in Romania for F-16 fighter jets that opened in November, and that talks are being held with the US and Denmark to decide whether Ukraine can deploy the jets as soon as possible. The death toll from the eruption of the Mount Merapi volcano in Indonesia on Sunday has risen to 22 people. Rescuers found 9 more bodies on Tuesday after resuming their search, which had been suspended on Monday due to safety concerns. 1 person is still missing. There were 75 hikers in the area during the eruption, most of whom were evacuated, although many suffered from burns. Mount Merapi, which means Mountain of Fire, is around 3,000 meters high and is one of the most active of Indonesia's 127 volcanoes. The mountain on West Sumatra spewed a 3-kilometer ash cloud into the air when it erupted on Sunday, blanketing the surrounding region in ash. A Spanish prosecutor has requested a 4-year prison sentence on Tuesday for 4 football fans accused of racial hate crimes against Real Madrid winger Vinicius Jr. They are accused of hanging an inflatable black effigy dressed in a replica of Vinicius Jr.'s number 20 shirt off a bridge near Real Madrid's training ground, along with a banner reading "Madrid hates Real." The incident happened ahead of Real's match against local rival Atletico Madrid in January. The 4 defendants are members of far-right fan group Frente Atletico and have been accused of showing an unequivocal sign of contempt and repudiation of the victim's skin color and an attempt to undermine the victim's peace of mind. The prosecutor has also requested joint compensation of around $6,500 in moral damage caused to Vinicius Jr. An American tourist was killed in the Bahamas in a shark attack on Monday. The 44-year-old female was paddleboarding with a companion in waters near the resort in western New Providence Island, near the capital Nassau, when a shark attacked. A lifeguard came to the aid of the paddleboarders. However, the woman had suffered serious trauma to the right side of her body and later died. According to the program director of the International Shark Attack File, there have been a couple of shark-related deaths in the Bahamas in the past 5 years. On average, about 5 people a year die from shark attacks. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The chill is not the major issue today. It's the dust that we're covered by all day in most places. Southwesterly winds have brought more dust into the country, boosting dust levels to very bad levels in the latter half of the day. Another reason to keep a face mask on today. Then there will be light rain across Korea with less than 5 millimeters of precipitation expected. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province could see snow instead of rain. Meanwhile, a dry advisory remains in place for some of the East Coast and Busan and Ulsan. Afternoon highs are similar to slightly lower this afternoon, Seoul topping out at 10 degrees Celsius, but winter seems to be far away on Jeju Island, topping out at 19 degrees Celsius. Partly sunny skies are blurred by that fine dust. Today's precipitation will bring a slight chill tomorrow morning, but it won't be too bad. And there will not be a major cold snap for the next 5 days. Also, air quality should improve tomorrow. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, during which we address Korea's shrinking youth population and more. Do stay with us.